The rain arrived first as a whisper, then as a drumbeat, pounding the slate roof of St. Morel's abandoned chapel until each drop echoed like a fingernail on a coffin lid. Father Vincent Delacroix, coat darkened to charcoal, pushed the warped oak doors and stepped inside, tasting damp stone and decay on his tongue. 28 years had passed since he'd crossed this threshold. The air still smelled of candle wax and regret. The nave was a ruin of overturned pews and shattered stained glass. Moonlight, strangled by storm clouds, oozed through jagged reds and purples to paint the floor in bruised colors. Each step scraped memory raw. He saw 4 young women kneeling in a line, heads bowed, voices woven into a single timid hymn, ghosts conjured by guilt rather than faith. The vision dissolved, leaving only dust swirling in his lantern beam. A broken steeple bell clanged overhead, jarred by wind, and Vincent's pulse answered. He tightened his grip on the brass lantern, its flame a small, stubborn eye in the dark, and moved toward the side aisle. The stones underfoot were slick with algae, and the smell of wet earth seeped up from cracks. Like a warning whispered too late. He stopped where the floor met the crypt stairs. The marble banister had crumbled, leaving jagged teeth. Torchlight once guided pilgrims downward. Tonight, only the lantern's cough-colored glow revealed narrow steps slick with black water. He hesitated, remembering the bishop's polite phone call earlier that week. Just catalog the relics, Father, and lock the place up. A simple request, but every instinct screamed that relics were never the most valuable things buried in St. Morel. At the bottom landing, the rain sounded distant, like applause from another world. Vincent raised the lantern. Crypt walls sweated. Candle niches yawned empty. He followed the curve to a sealed alcove whose plaster bulged, spider-webbed with cracks. Moisture had been working for years, prying loose the church's secrets. He pressed a palm to the wallsoft, almost pulpy, and felt an answering throb, as though something behind it still had a heartbeat. He fetched a rusted crowbar from a janitor's bucket. One decisive swing, and plaster gave with a wet sigh. Bricks tumbled outward. A smell rolled over him, metallic, earthy, unmistakable. Vincent choked back bile and widened the hole until the lantern light slipped inside. There, half buried in crumbling mortar, lay a rosary of freshwater pearls. The crucifix snapped clean in two. His knees forgot their strength, and he knelt. Rainwater from the ceiling dripped onto the pearls, making them gleam like a string of frozen tears. He recognized it instantly, Sister Magdalena's wedding white rosary. A gift from her mother before the convent claimed her silence. He had watched the young novice fingered those beads nervously on the day of her vows. The same day he first wondered why her smile looked rehearsed. Magdalena. His voice cracked, absurd, because he knew she could not answer. Yet the crypt seemed to inhale, waiting. Water sluiced down the stairwell. Distant doors slammed as wind barged through the nave. Vincent clenched the broken crucifix. Lord, grant me courage, he whispered. A memory answered, sharp as incense smoke. Some truths, brother, are best kept behind stone. Mother Superior, Miriam's caution, delivered the night Magdalena vanished. He felt her presence now, stern and cold, hiding in the dripping mortar. Vincent slid his hand deeper into the cavity. His fingers brushed something coarse, a fragment of woolen habit, rotted to lace. Beneath it, softer, almost silky hair. He recoiled, heart ricocheting, then forced himself back. Pinching the lantern between elbow and chest, a single dark braid floated on the debris, still bound by a pale ribbon. He remembered tying that ribbon for Magdalena before Mass, joking that even saints needed straight lines. The ribbon was stained now, the color of old wine. He could not stay in the dark with that ribbon, not yet. Carefully, he wrapped the rosary and braid in a handkerchief, slipped them beneath his cassock, and retreated up the steps. Each footfall slapped water, drumming the refrain of a requiem he had hoped to forget. In the nave, the tempest roared. The stained glass windows flickered like film strips, freezing long-gone faces in panes of red and indigo. Lightning strobed, and for an instant Vincent swore he saw 4 silhouettes kneeling where pews had once stood Magdalena, Iris, Noel, Clara, heads bowed, lips moving in their eternal vow of silence. The illusion vanished, but their unheard hymn lingered. Threading through the thunder, "Forgive me," he breathed, crossing himself. The rain hammered harder, demanding attention, but another sound rose beneath it, faint chanting, girlish and mournful, echoing from memory. It drew him backward in time. Toward the night their voices were last heard together, and the silence that followed still scratches at eternity. Chapter 2. Sisters in Silence. Word count: 850. The morning after the storm, the village of St. Morel lay drenched in cold mist. It seeped into cobblestones, blurred the skeletal trees, and curled like a veil around the chapel's steeple. Inside the convent, 28 years earlier, silence was not absence, it was ritual, power, obedience. Sister Magdalena stood barefoot in the corridor, pale light brushing her face through a stained glass window of St. Cecilia. Her fingers worried the same broken rosary-white pearls, cross half-cracked that would one day end up buried behind a crypt wall. But now it was whole, trembling in her grip. Footsteps tapped from behind. Sister Noel, Magdalena murmured without turning, "How do you always know?" Noel's voice, soft as linen. Magdalena smiled faintly. "Because you hold your breath before you speak." They stood together in the narrow hall, habits brushing. The chapel bell rang faintly, calling them to morning devotion, but neither moved. "She watched me again last night," Noel whispered. "Who?" "Iris." A pause while I slept. "I felt her shadow." Magdalena said nothing. In St. Morel, direct accusations were rare. Everything passed through breathless hints and sideways glances. Sister Iris had a reputation for waking before the bell, for praying too hard, for listening at keyholes. In the refectory, the nuns sat like statues. 2 long wooden tables, 1 line of veiled heads on each side. No one spoke, no one looked up. A crucifix hung above the bread and tea, its Christ lean and sorrowful, as if worn thin by their discipline. Sister Clara passed Magdalena a chipped cup. Their hands brushed. Clara's fingers lingered a second too long. A sign in that touch, more flickering, dangerous. Across the table, Mother Superior Miriam's eyes pinned them both. After breakfast, silence deepened into prayer. The chapel was cold, the incense cloying. The girls knelt. Magdalena closed her eyes and forced her heartbeat to still. She felt Iris beside her, rigid as a pillar. Clara behind her, breath trembling. From the pulpit, Mother Miriam's voice broke the hush. "Obedience is not only an action, it is a thought that shapes the soul. Thoughts disobedient to God must be confessed." The word hovered like a blade. That evening, the groundskeeper arrived, harmless, a man whose silence had its own texture. He had been hired after the last war, a veteran with a limp and eyes that didn't blink right. He moved through the garden with the rhythm of someone used to following orders. Some said he'd taken a vow of silence himself. Others said he simply didn't trust his voice anymore. From her window, Magdalena watched him move among the roses. He paused and looked up. Their eyes met. She dropped the curtain too fast. Her hands shook. That night, they were summoned, one by one, to confession. A ritual. Sister Iris was first. She entered the dark confessional and emerged, paler eyes slick with tears she wouldn't allow to fall. Clara went in next. When she came out, she touched her cheek an absent, unconscious gesture. Magdalena sat outside the booth, waiting, breath shallow. When it was her turn, she stepped in. The wood creaked under her weight. Incense lingered thick and suffocating. A grill separated her from the other side. But it wasn't Mother Miriam's voice that greeted her. It was a man's, deep, unfamiliar. "You think you're alone in your doubts." She froze. "I've seen you," the voice said. "In the garden, in the chapel. You don't believe like the others." Her fingers tightened around the rosary. "Who are you?" Silence. "Then you'll learn. All of you will." The booth door creaked open. No one stood outside. No footsteps. No retreating shadow. That night, Magdalena wrote in her hidden journal, one tucked behind a loose stone beneath her bed. Something is wrong here. Something rots beneath the floorboards. In the dormitory, the four girls lay in silence. Magdalena, Noel, Iris, Claire, each curled on narrow cots beneath crucifixes and peeling plaster. Outside, wind scraped against the windows. I heard him too, Clara whispered, barely audible. Iris rolled over. Then keep it to yourself. He knew things, Clara said. About me. About us. Don't be dramatic, Iris snapped. Magdalena stayed silent, fingers under her pillow, touching the rosary. The bell rang twice in the courtyard. Late. Strange. A shadow moved past the dormitory door. In the chapel, someone lit a candle. No name, no sound, just flame, catching slowly in the dark, and far beneath the floor. Something stirred. The first thing they noticed was that Sister Magdalena missed morning prayer. Not just late, absent, in the convent of St. Corel. Absence wasn't an option. Sickness earned isolation. Discipline earned silence. But absence, that was rebellion. Or worse, escape. Mother Miriam's face betrayed no alarm, only a tightening of the mouth. She is on private retreat, she told the assembled nuns, her voice a chisel in marble. She asked not to be disturbed. The others didn't speak. Not even Clara, whose fingers twitched at her sides. Not even Noel, whose eyes swelled with questions. And especially not Iris, who kept her face lowered but wore a look of fierce calculation, like a cat who knew. The mouse had vanished too neatly. That afternoon, while the others gardened, Clara slipped away. Her bare feet whispered across the chapel stones, and she found Magdalena's cell door unlocked. A small mercy. Inside, the air smelled stale, untouched. The bed was neatly made. The crucifix still hung. Magdalena's habit hung on the wall, dry and folded, but her shoes were missing. Clara knelt and reached beneath the cot. She found the usual prayer book, the rosary Magdalena always fingered, and tucked between the pajica pressed violet. She pressed it to her lips and began to cry. That night, the storm returned. Thunder crawled across the mountains like a slow beast. The convent candles flickered, shadows stuttering on the stone. Sister Noel huddled near the window, watching lightning stitch the sky. Do you think she ran? She whispered to Clara, who sat stiff beside her. She wouldn't. Not without saying goodbye. She was afraid, Noel murmured. I think she knew something. SSH, hissed Iris from the next cot. They'll hear. They could have meant anyone. The walls, the ceiling, God, or Mother Miriam, whose footsteps sounded too quiet for comfort these days. That evening's prayer was held in complete darkness. No candles, just the sound of breath, knees on stone, and one voice rising from the shadows. Mother Miriam, reading aloud Psalm 94. They crush your people, Lord. They oppress your inheritance. They slay the widow and the foreigner. They murder the fatherless. Her voice cracked only once on the word murder. She repeated it. Too slowly, Sister Iris opened one eye. She saw Mother Miriam holding a folded note in her palm, white against the black of her robe, but it wasn't scripture. It was Magdalena's handwriting. After prayer, Iris approached the Mother Superior in the cloister hall. Forgive me, Reverend Mother. Is Sister Magdalena safe? She is with the Lord, came the immediate reply. The sentence struck like cold water. Do you mean? I mean, Miriam said, turning sharply, she is closer to God now. That is all you need to know. Then, she walked away. The door to the punishment chamber stood open behind her. Vincent Still, a young deacon in 1980, was not told of Magdalena's absence. He learned of it 2 days later, when he asked to give her confession before Sunday Mass and was told, she no longer requires it. That answer stayed lodged in his chest like a splinter. He tried to find her name in the diocese records. Transfers filed. No death certificate. No notice. Only a blank page where her story should have continued. He tried to pray it away. He couldn't. Late that week, he returned to the convent alone, slipping through the rear garden gate before sunrise. The roses had been trimmed recently. The dirt beneath one bush looked freshly turned. He reached down and found a small ribbon, faded, damp, pink, with red smears. A hair caught in the knot. He took it, hid it in his coat, and said nothing. He was young, afraid, and told himself, maybe it belonged to a child from the village. Maybe it's nothing. But his gut twisted. Back in the chapel, he approached the confessional booth. It was empty, dust on the seat. But something was scratched into the inner wood paneling. The veil is a curtain. Beneath it, faint and jagged, a single word: run. When Vincent confronted Mother Miriam later that day, she smiled without warmth. You should be careful with your curiosity, Deacon. Curiosity is what led Eve to the tree. I'm not Eve, he said. No, she agreed. You're a man, and men in holy places often believe they're sent to fix what doesn't want to be healed. That night, Sister Clara woke screaming. She said she'd seen Magdalena in her dreams wearing a veil of blood, standing in the garden, pointing downward. No eyes, Clara whispered. She had no eyes. In the morning, Mother Miriam led a special prayer session and announced a new rule. All personal journals, letters, and items are to be surrendered for spiritual review. No one asked why, because by then, the silence was louder than truth, and Magdalena's name was already being erased. One sister gone, 3 remained, and one pair of eyes, cold calculating, was watching from the shadows. The convent archive was colder than the chapel's crypts, though it sat directly under the bell tower. Time forgot it, as did the sisters' dust laced every book, every shelf, every icon with the weight of decades. In 2008, Father Vincent stood there with the rosary and ribbon still wrapped in his handkerchief, now stiff with dried mud. The storm had passed, but the unease remained settling in his stomach like wet ash. He had come here for records, transfer papers, any proof. Sister Magdalena didn't simply vanish into thin air. What he found instead was a drawer that stuck. It groaned. When pulled, like something protesting resurrection. Inside, faded envelopes, tied in twine, untouched, unsent. The return address, Sister Iris Moreau, St. Morel Convent. Vincent sat down at the reading desk, heart hammering. He opened the first. To my brother alias I am writing because something is wrong here. Not just discipline, not just obedience, wrong in the bones. Magdalena is gone, and they told us lies. I tried to speak to Clara, but she won't. She's afraid. We all are, even the walls. Listen here. The letter ended abruptly, mid-sentence. No postmark, never mailed. He opened the second to the bishops. Officer, respectfully, I request a transfer. Conditions here are not spiritually healthy. I fear the Mother Superior has allowed certain punishments that do not align with Christ's mercy. I believe there may have been violence. I will not stay silent if another sister disappears. There were 5 more, each one more frantic. By the final note, the handwriting had become sharp. Slanted. Noel says she hears Magdalena at night. Clara won't speak. I don't sleep anymore. Someone touched my journal. I buried it beneath the altar. I don't know who to trust. If this is my last letter, know this: we are not just vanishing, we are being taken. Vincent folded the letters back with trembling hands. Why were these hidden? Who had stopped them from being mailed? The light in the archive flickered, old wiring groaning under age and damp. He rose, searching the cabinets labeled personal effects. One had a rusted nameplate, Iris M. Inside was a prayer shawl, brittle with time, a cracked leather Bible, and tucked into the inner flap a photograph, but, for girls younger, standing outside the convent gates in spring sunlight. Magdalena smiling, hand raised like she was about to say something. Iris beside her, jaw tight. Clara Hubbard turned, Noel looking at someone off camera. Vincent stared. The date on the back, April 1980. 2 weeks before, Magdalena vanished. He pocketed the photo and returned to the chapel. The stained glass still pulsed with muted color. Dust moved in motes through the candlelight. He crossed to the altar and knelt, fingers feeling for loose stone. There, one tile shifted slightly. He wedged it up with a knife. Beneath it, wrapped in oilcloth, was a journal, mildewed, but intact. The first page bore Iris's name, day 23. She was crying again. Magdalena says the mother watches her sleep. I think she's right. Thomas leaves things in the garden drawings, and sometimes I see her looking back at him. Day 30. I lied in confession today. I said I had no doubt, but I do. I doubt everything. I doubt the silence. Day 35. Last night, I heard chanting. From below, the entries stopped abruptly. The last sentence. She screamed once. Just once. Then nothing. Vincent closed the journal slowly. The silence returned, pressing against the windows like fog. But something had cracked. Not just a wall, a memory, a warning. He stood, dusted off his coat, and turned toward the door. But as he passed the front pew, he noticed something he had missed earlier. A second rosary, almost identical, but this one was missing the crucifix entirely. He bent to pick it up, and froze. Beneath the pew was a single footprint. Small, bare, fresh in the dust. The dead don't leave footprints. St. Morel kept no clocks. Time was measured by the bell, by the sun across the cloister, by the rhythm of prayer and punishment. But that morning in 1980, time fractured. Sister Iris didn't speak during breakfast. She moved as if underwater, eyes rimmed red, lips sealed. In a taut line, Noel tried to meet her gaze, but Iris refused. Something about her face looked scorched on physically, but spiritually. Mother Miriam watched her through the entire meal. Not subtly, not kindly. Like a judge waiting for a guilty hand to twitch. After the final prayer, Iris was summoned. Alone, the punishment room was at the far end of the convent, past a hallway that always smelled of damp stone and old soap. It had no name on the door, just a brass knob, and a key only Mother Miriam kept. Iris Moreau, the mother said flatly. You've become a distraction to the others. I asked a question, Iris replied. That isn't sin. It is when the question casts doubt. Doubt is a spark. Sparks become fire. Iris stepped forward, heart hammering. Maybe fire is what we need. That was the last defiant thing she ever said. The room had no windows. Only a cot, a small crucifix, and walls that absorbed sound. Vincent saw her once, briefly, through the narrow chapel windows as she was led there. He recognized the drag in her steps. Fear disguised as obedience, but he was just a deacon. Not her confessor, not her priest. And so he said nothing. Later that night, Clara crept down the hallway with Noel. Their hands clutching each other like frightened children. She's been in there too long, Clara whispered. Noel nodded. She never missed prayers before. They leaned their ears to the door. At first nothing. Then, a soft scrape. Then a single word, hoarse, like breath on fire. No, it came again, louder this time, then a slam, a thud, and then, silence. They ran. The next morning, the bell rang early, too early. The girls gathered in the chapel, confused. Mother Miriam stood before them with her hands clasped in front of her. Sister Iris has taken leave for personal restoration. A pause. She will not return. That night, Vincent found scorch marks on the chapel floor, faint, smudged, but real. Near the altar, as if something had burned quickly, then been scrubbed away. When he asked Thomas, the groundskeeper, about it, the man only looked at him for a long time and said, "Some things catch fire, even when no match is struck." Vincent knew then that Iris hadn't left. Not alive. Not by choice. And yet there was no body. No announcement. No service. Clara sat in the garden that evening, staring at the statue of the Virgin Mary. She used to say this place eats girls whole. She told Noel. And we all just bow while it chews. Noel clutched her hand. We have to stay together now, promise. Clara nodded, but she didn't believe it. That night, lightning struck the old willow behind the convent. The fire spread fast, furious. It roared toward the back wall, licking at the ivy and torching the soiled black dot. The nuns gathered to pray as the flames burned. But Mother Miriam did not join them. Vincent ran out with buckets of water. He passed Thomas, who stood near the smoke. unmoving watching. And in the soot, near the edge of the fire's reach, something glimmered. A tiny medal. A saint's pendant. Iris's name was scratched onto the back. Vincent pocketed it before anyone could see. Back in his room, he sat on his cot with the pendant in one hand, and Magdalena's rosary in the other. 2 sisters, gone, 2 objects, 2 warnings. His window blew open with a sudden gust. He turned, startled. On his mirror, written in the fogged glass, 3 is not 4. The well sat at the edge of the convent garden, ringed in moss-covered stone, and crowned by a rusted iron crank that hadn't groaned in decades. It was always there, half forgotten, too old, too deep, too dark to matter. Until it did, in 2008. After a week of sleepless nights and voices in the walls that shouldn't have been there, Father Vincent returned to St. Morel not as a priest, but as a man desperate to know what he'd spent 28 years avoiding. A storm had passed again. As if summoned by guilt, the ground near the back courtyard had collapsed overnight, heavy with rain, soft with decay. Vincent stood at the edge of the sinkhole, water pooling near his boots, and peered down. The well mouth had cracked open like a wound. He grabbed a lantern and stepped cautiously onto the old stones. Something glinted below. A shape, not natural, not stone. He climbed down using the old pulley frame. The ropes had rotted, so he moved hand over hand, each breath heavier than the last. By the time he reached the bottom, the light flickered, and the air was thick with something sour, wet, earth, iron, and something older than either. His boot struck something hard. He lowered the lantern. A locket, small, gold, cracked at the hinge. He opened it carefully. Inside, 2 miniature photos, one of Clara, one of a boy he didn't recognize. Behind them, something else, a tiny rolled scrap of paper. It read, "Forgive me." She knew, Iris knew. "We thought it would end, but it keeps going." His hand shook. Then he saw it, half buried beside the locket flesh. A hand, pale and bloated, fingers twisted into the mud, as if still trying to crawl out. He staggered back, slipped, fell hard against the stones. The lantern skidded across the muck and extinguished. In the dark, the only sound was water dripping, and something else. A slow ripple. A breath that wasn't his. Vincent clambered back up, mud caked to his elbows, heart howling inside his ribs. When he reached the surface, he stumbled to the chapel. Knees hit the stone floor. He wanted to scream, but what words do you scream? For scenes you helped bury. His vision blurred. He was not alone. A shadow moved near the side pews. Soft, small. Noelle. He hadn't seen her since the week Iris vanished. But this was not 1980. This was now. He blinked and she was gone. A hallucination, he told himself. Guilt. Old walls and older ghosts. But as he stood, his foot nudged something beneath the altar. The same footprints. Bare, small, wet. Vincent whispered, a psalm through clenched teeth. Even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death. Then the chapel bell rang. Only once. It hadn't worked in years. He turned toward the belfry, eyes wide, heart roaring, past and present crashing together like stones in the dark. Somewhere below, the well dripped. But something was now awake above. The tape recorder was ancient. Dust-laced reels, cracked plastic, the kind of thing only a priest or a ghost would still keep. Vincent found it in a locked drawer behind the sacristy. One that hadn't opened with his master key. It took a bent hairpin and a full 30 minutes of breathless prying. Inside, 9 old cassettes, numbered, titled. All familiar names. He had once heard the voices of these sisters in laughter and psalms, and one unmarked tape. Just a number 12. The handwriting was faint, almost rubbed away. Vincent inserted it carefully, half expecting the tape to dissolve in the machine. It clicked, spun, then static, then breath, then a voice, male, deep, not young, not old, a voice he hadn't heard in decades, yet knew instantly. Thomas. Bless me, Father, for I have sinned. Though I don't know if love is a sin, I don't know what I am anymore. But she made me feel human again. Vincent sat down, throat dry, This wasn't a normal confession. It had never been given to him. Someone had recorded Thomas in secret. Or he had recorded himself. Sister Magdalena. Her voice she sang in Latin, but I heard it like thunder. She was kind to me, looked at me like I wasn't just the broken man in the garden, and she knew. I think she knew I wanted to say things I'd buried with my uniform. The voice trembled, not with shame, but with memory. I asked her once if she ever wanted to leave. She said no. But her eyes said something else. She was afraid of the mother, of what happened to Iris. I told her I could help her. I could dig a way out. But then she changed. She pulled away, said God would punish us. A pause, a long breath, and then she told, I know she told. And everything turned black after that. The next words came slower, colder, like they had been carved out instead of spoken. She came to me crying, said she made a mistake, wanted to leave, said Clara knew. But it was too late. Mother Miriam said it had to be dealt with, for the sanctity of the order. A metallic thud, possibly a fist, possibly a memory. They said I had to help. That she was tainted now, not holy. I tried to protest, but then they reminded me of my past, said I owed penance, said this was, service. Silence on the tape. Then the last confession. I carried her down the old stairs. She didn't scream. I think she forgave me. I think she knew the truth, that no one was going to save us. That silence is what God listens to. Click. End. Vincent didn't breathe for a full minute. Then he hit rewind and listened. Again, and again. The third time, he noticed something faint in the background behind Thomas's voice. A humming. Musical. A low, trembling version of Ave Verum. Corpus. It was her, Magdalena, humming while being carried down, or worse, humming. After she was gone, the phone rang in the rectory. He didn't answer. The walls suddenly felt too tight, the ceiling too low. He stood, clutching the tape, and walked to the front pew. The photograph from the archive was still in his coat. For girls, one future, but now, two gone. One confessing, and one still in hiding, unless Clara was already another ghost. Just quieter. He looked up toward the chapel rafters. The bell. It had rung the night he found the braid, but no one had been up there in years. Vincent crossed himself, tucked the cassette into his coat, and began climbing the narrow stairs to the belfry. Each step creaked like a ribcage breaking open. At the top, wind howled through broken slats, cobwebs clung like prayer veils, and in the far corner something moved. A figure, small, kneeling, humming. He stepped forward. Noel, he asked, but even as he said the name, he knew it wasn't her. The figure turned, slowly. Not Noel. Not Clara. Just a shape, a shadow, a girl with no face, holding a string of pearls slick with something dark. The humming stopped. Vincent fell backward down the stairs when he hit the floor. Blood pooled around his collar. The bell didn't ring again, but the tape kept spinning. They were small, barely noticeable. For wooden crosses, carved crudely by hand. Buried beneath the ivy wall in the garden where no one ever walked anymore. No names, no dates. Just tiny grooves where rainwater had eaten into the grain like decay in bone. Clara used to pray there every evening in the summer of 1980. She said it was the only place God still listened. And yet even then, she avoided stepping too close to the tree line. Now, in 2008, Vincent crawled across that ivy on bruised knees. His cassock, torn, blood still crusted near his temple from the fall. The tape recorder clutched in one shaking hand. The other dragged behind, him dislocated, maybe broken. But none of that mattered. He had seen her, or something shaped like her, and now he was following the trail that the church had paved in whispers and half-buried grief. The first cross stood only a foot tall. No inscription, just a single hair ribbon nailed to the base, sun-bleached and fluttering. The second had a small metal charm hammered to it, a fish. The Christian symbol Magdalena used to sketch in her journal margins. The third had nothing, just rot. A scar in the ground beside it, like the earth had split, and then changed its mind. And the fourth, it wasn't there. Just the hole where it had once stood, something freshly dug. Vincent knelt at the site and began scraping at the soil, no shovel, just his bare hands, raw and trembling. He hit wood, not a coffin, not deep enough, a box. He yanked it loose. Inside, cloth, white, folded, and a journal. Not Iris's, not Magdalena's, Clara's her name, written neatly on the inside cover, followed by a single verse in shaky handwriting. We are the lambs, they are the wolves in robes. He flipped through. June 1980. I saw them take Iris. She didn't go quietly. She screamed into her own hands. I still hear it. July 1980. Thomas was crying. I think he loved Magdalena. I think she tried to run, and they made him clean it up. He walks like someone dragging chains now. August 1980. Mother, Miriam told me Noelle was gone. Ascended, she said. I don't believe her. I found blood on the confessional step. Noelle always bled when she was nervous, Jude. Her lip raw. September 1980. I keep dreaming of fire. But when I wake, everything's colder. Like they've taken something else out of me while I slept. I think I'm next. Vincent turned the last page. There was no final entry, just a drawing for crosses, and above the fourth, a question mark behind him. A twig snapped. He turned no one. But the garden had changed. The wind was gone. The ivy didn't move. Everything felt held in breath. Then the chapel bell rang again twice this time. He stood, clutching the journal, and backed away toward the chapel doors. But as he turned to open them, he saw something that hadn't been there before. Above the entryway, carved into the stone arch with something sharp, deep, deliberate. Only 3 lie here. Vincent stumbled backward. Not for Dot. Not for Graves. Just 3. So where was the 4th? Clara, the one who'd never screamed. The one who obeyed. The one who prayed in the shadows of other people's pain. Maybe she'd never vanished. Maybe she'd just gone deeper, inside the chapel. The lights flickered. The pulpit stood empty. But there were footsteps overhead in the choir loft. Bare. Slow. Vincent stepped inside. The crosses behind him watched like witnesses. The rosary in his pocket tightened like a noose, and somewhere beneath his feet, the floor creaked. The chapel was empty, but not quiet above, in the choir loft. A hymn drifted too soft to understand, too clear to ignore. No instrument, no echo. Just a voice, hoarse, low, and broken by time. Vincent stepped slowly toward the altar. Clara's journal clutched to his chest like a dying child. Each footstep felt like betrayal. Like he was waking something that had waited patiently for someone foolish enough to care. The steps to the loft groaned under his weight. Dust curled around him like incense, thick with memory and mold. Halfway up, he saw her. She sat cross-legged in the corner, facing the stained glass. Veil gone, hair streaked gray, thin, fragile arms wrapped around her knees. Clara, she didn't turn as he climbed the last step. Just kept humming. Ave Verum Corpus. Same song, same slow agony. Clara, he whispered. She stopped humming, tilted her head. I thought you were gone, he said. I was, she murmured. They buried me, but not deep enough. Her voice had a strange peace to it, not relief, not madness, a tired sort of clarity, like someone who had nothing left to hide. They told me I was strong, she said, the quiet one, the good one. But I saw everything. I remembered it all. Vincent stepped closer. She flinched. I read your journal, he said. I left it for you, she replied, eyes still on the window. You were the only one who looked up when we cried. He crouched beside her. What happened to you, Clara? She finally turned to him. I waited for them to kill me, she said. Like they did to Iris. Like Magdalena. Like Noel, but they didn't. Why? Because I said yes. The words hit like ice. To what? He asked, voice barely. Breath. To silence, to survival. I became their voice, their hands. I buried what was left. I cleaned the blood. I convinced the others to lie. I watched Thomas dig holes he couldn't climb out of. Her lips trembled. And then I helped fill them. Vincent swallowed. You were just a girl. I was their knife, she corrected. And they forgave me for it, because I stayed useful. That was my holy calling. She laughed a cracked, bitter sound. But the others didn't forgive me. They stayed. In the walls. In my head, I see them every night. Noelle bleeds from her mouth. Magdalena hums without eyes. Iris just stares. She never blinks. Clara stood slowly. I wanted to confess. I tried, but Miriam made it clear. Sins confessed are sins recorded. Sins erased leave no record. She stepped toward the choir bench. Lifted a floorboard. Inside was a small box. She handed it to Vincent. He opened it. Inside 3 rings. 3 silver bands, each with initials carved inside. MAIMND. They wore those when they took their final vows, Clara whispered. Now they wear nothing. Vincent looked up at her. Where is Miriam now? Clara smiled faintly. She died 5 years ago. Alone. They buried her beneath the chapel. Said she died in peace. They lied. I watched her claw the walls in her last breath. Silence fell. She saw them too, Clara added. But she never said their names. That was the price. Vincent rose. And you? She shrugged. I stay. I sing. I wait. For what? For someone to dig up more than bones. The chapel bell rang again. Vincent flinched. Clara didn't. You should go, she said. You've heard enough. I can help. No, she said gently. You can't. She walked down the steps, barefoot, robes dragging behind her like a shroud. He followed. But by the time he reached the chapel floor, she was gone. Only the rings remained in his palm, and a trail of wet footprints, leading back toward the garden. Back to the 3 crosses. Back to the one that never had a name. Vincent didn't sleep that night. He sat in the nave, soaked in candlelight and dread. Clara was gone, yet the choir loft still creaked. The garden trembled through the stained glass. And the 3 rings on the altar clinked together softly, like tiny cursed bells. He laid the rings in a line. 3 gone. 3 marked. 1 left behind. But, not dead. Not forgiven. Not finished. He lit the final candle before the crucifix and opened Clara's journal to the last loose page tucked behind the binding. A map hand-sketched, scrawled with symbols, crosses, Latin words, and one phrase underlined 3 times. The 4th grave was never empty. It was waiting. The map pointed to a place beyond the garden, an old toolshed, forgotten, locked for years. At dawn, Vincent went alone. The shed was crooked, the wood rotting from decades of rain and secrets. He kicked the door open. The hinges snapped like bones. Inside, a floor covered in dry straw, moldy canvas, rusted tools, but under it all, another wooden board, different, newer, replaced recently. He pried it open, a shaft, 6 feet deep, lined in brick. At the bottom, more cloth. He climbed down, breath ragged, hands scraped raw. There, beneath the dirt, lay a body small, wrapped in a nun's robe, arms crossed, face turned away, and beside it, another. But this one moved. He froze. The second shape twitched, coughed. Clara, he gasped. The figure stirred, but it wasn't Clara. It was Noelle, alive, eyes sunken, skin gray, lips cracked, but alive. Barely. She whispered something. He dropped to his knees. What? He asked. Her lips trembled. She buried me, when I begged her not to. He stared in horror. I wasn't supposed to talk, she croaked. I told Magdalena. What Thomas did, she said, we had to leave. But then she disappeared. And Clara told me, I'd be next. Unless I learned to listen. She coughed, blood flecking her chin. I listened, but she didn't care. Vincent reached to lift her. She screamed, not in panin, warning, don't touch me. She's still here. Vincent turned, and Clara was there, standing at the edge of the shaft, holding the 4th cross in both hands. Not crying, not shaking, smiling. Double quotes, you finally found her, she said. Good. Vincent stood slowly. You buried her alive. She confessed, Clara replied. But some things are too loud to be forgiven. She was a child. Clara tilted her head. So was I. Vincent stepped forward. Let her go, we can get help. You don't have to carry this anymore. I'm not carrying it, Clara said. She is. She raised the cross. Vincent lunged. The cross swung, splintered against the wall. Vincent shoved Clara backward. She hit the stone and crumpled. He dropped into the pit. Grabbed Noelle. She clung to him weakly. I've got you, he whispered. It's over. But Noelle shook her head. She won't stop, she rasped. She doesn't die, she just waits. Above them, Clara stood again, and behind her, a second figure, familiar. Fail. Torn eyes missing. Magdalena, not a ghost. Not a dream. Just. Present. Clara turned to her and whispered, See? I did what you asked. I kept them all. I stayed, I obeyed. But Magdalena didn't move, didn't speak, just stared, and then smiled. Clara fell to her knees, shaking. No, she whispered. No, you were supposed to forgive me. Magdalena stepped closer. No, you said I did it for you, and then Magdalena opened her mouth. But the voice that came out wasn't hers, it was Iris. The veil is a curtain, the grave is a door. We never left, Vincent screamed. Everything went dark. 2008. 3 weeks later, the convent was sealed. The report was brief. Structural collapse. Unstable foundation. No survivors found, but they never mentioned the garden. Never unearthed. The crosses never found the map. Present day, tourists visiting St. Morel say they hear humming in the chapel. Soft, female. Some say it's beautiful, some say it's a warning, but no one ever stays. After sundown, and no one prays near the fourth grave, before the chapel's bell tolled its final lie. Father Vincent made one last detour, an act of desperate diligence that now replayed in his skull like a warning. 3 days earlier, with Clara's map folded inside his breviary, he rode a damp suburban bus to St. Etienne Care Home, where the last nun of the old order, Mother Agnes Laurent, waited out her fevers of memory. The receptionist pointed him down a corridor that smelled of bleach and wilted carnations. Fluorescent bulbs jittered. Rubber soles squeaked. Behind every half-open door, an elderly soul muttered psalms or television trivia. Vincent's rehearsed questions, punishments, crosses shriveled by the time he reached room 18. A paper dove hung beside the number. He knocked. Mother Agnes sat propped against pillows. White hair escaping her veil. Rosary gliding through fragile fingers. Her eyes pale as fog glass, focused when he spoke her name. You were the boy with too much hope, she rasped. He pulled a chair close. Reverend Mother, 4 sisters vanished from St. Morel. I need the truth. At the word St. Morel, her gaze shuddered. The beads clicked like teeth. That place was built on vows, she murmured, but it fed on silence. Who demanded that silence? She inhaled, lungs rattling. The devil wore a cassock, Thomas, Vincent ventured, a brittle laugh. No, my dear, Thomas was just the wolf we trained for the hunt. Then who? Her eyelids fluttered. He sat in judgment every Easter, blessed our ruin with holy water. A priest, name him Tearsweld. Dig up that name and the church will bury you, too. Vincent laid Clara's journal, the rings, the map upon her blanket. Agnes touched the silver bands as though they burned. We thought we were shepherds, she whispered. But we were the slaughterhouse. Lightning flashed. For a heartbeat stained glass shimmered over sterile walls. Help me save what's left of their souls, he pleaded. Souls are never lost, she replied, suddenly fierce. Only the living go astray. She pressed her rosary into his palm. It was Iris's. She gave it to me the night she vanished, said, if I'm wrong about God, pray anyway. The beads were warm, impossibly warm, as if Iris still knelt somewhere, whispering Gloria Patri. Agnes gripped his wrist. Truth consumes, she warned, voice thin as parchment. Bring light, and shadows fight back. Nurses drifted in, monitors beeped. Agnes slid into murmurs about gardens and bells that rang themselves. They ushered Vincent out politely. A Sudden memory ambushed him. Spring 1980, Agnes striding through the cloister. Habit snapping like a sail, warning novices that obedience means erasing self. Even then, she had looked carved from stone. Now erosion showed in every tremor. He dared another question earlier. Why were the garden crosses nameless? She answered without meeting his eyes. Names are seeds, Father, plant them, and truth grows. Her frail hand made a plucking gesture. We uprooted them. Agnes's lids fluttered again. Some wounds outlive the body, she said, voice brittle as wafer. Pray she forgot how to bleed. Outside, while rain sheeted the parking lot, he phoned the diocesan office from a pay booth. The secretary asked why. He opened his mouth, then saw the security camera's unblinking eye and hung up. The institution would protect itself. Salvation rested elsewhere. On the bus, an elderly woman hummed Avenue Verum Corpus. Vincent gripped irises, beads, unsettled but silent. St. Morel's crooked steeple stabbed the horizon, lit by ragged lightning. Vincent crossed himself, whispering an act of contrition, not for sins behind him, but for whatever justice demanded ahead. 3 weeks after the collapse, a demolition crew arrived at St. Morel under orders from the diocese. No press, no documentation. Just quiet men in orange vests and black gloves, paid to erase what even the Lord wouldn't forgive. But they didn't know. They didn't know that floor still bled in places. They didn't know the well never stopped dripping. They didn't know about the earth's pulse beneath the chapel. A rhythm older than their concrete. Older than even the Latin on the walls. 2 nights before the demolition, Father Vincent returned one final time. He was gaunt now. Haunted, his left eye twitched from sleepless weeks. He carried only 2 things. A shovel, Clara's journal, its last page soaked with rain. He passed the altar. The rosaries were gone, so were the rings someone had cleaned. Scrubbed the sins away like blood from linen, but the crosses in the garden remained 3, still crooked. The 4th had been nailed back into the soil, fresh wood, still bleeding sap. He stood before it and whispered. She was alive when you buried her. She never screamed, and still, you feared her. No answer, not from the sky, not from below. Vincent knelt and began to dig, not at the base of the new cross, but between the 2nd and 3rd. Clara's journal had left a hint. One was planted among the others to guard them, a false grave, an anchor. After an hour, the shovel hit metal. He cleared the dirt. A hatch. Old, bolted, sealed. He pried it open. Inside stairs, stone-carved and steep. He descended. Each step felt heavier than the last, as if the air itself tried to turn him back. At the bottom, a narrow tunnel, ribbed with roots. And then, the crypt, 4 alcoves. 3 held bodies, preserved, almost unnaturally. Magdalena, Iris, Noel, each in their habit, hands crossed, eyes closed, but not at peace. The 4th alcove was empty, but the name was already carved above it. Clara, Jean Dolben, born 1961, died unmarked. Vincent turned to leave, but the tunnel behind him had changed. Clara stood there, not young, not old. Not real. Her voice echoed off the stone. You came to bury me. No, Vincent said. I came to end this. She stepped forward. You still don't understand. He raised the crucifix. It crumbled in his hand. Clara smiled. We weren't victims, we were mirrors. You all just hated what you saw. Walls pulsed. Magdalena opened her eyes. Iris sat up. Noel wept. Clara whispered. You can't bury what never died. Vincent screamed. 3 days later, the convent was gone. Bulldozed, razed, salted. Some whispered, but the land refused to settle. Grass wouldn't grow. Birds never sang. A sinkhole opened where the altar once stood. And every Sunday at dawn, a woman in a grey habit walks its edge, barefoot, humming. Sometimes she kneels, sometimes she weeps, but she always disappears before the sun fully rises. 20 years later, a young seminarian doing research on the lost convent discovers a photo. 4 girls, 1 ribbon, 3 smiles. The fourth, looking away, behind her, just barely visible in the stained glass, a figure in shadow. Hands pressed to the glass dot as if trapped. Or watching.